want you to address my Russiagate observation. I mean, John says Trump was an idiot. Let me stipulate that. Trump's an idiot. But the anti-Trump Russiagate motivated takedown attempts were built on sand. They were false. It was a moral panic. And I'm wondering whether or not it impeded our capacity to see what has now developed into a Russian attack in Ukraine, and whether or not possibilities of mitigating that by seeing Russia as a power that needed to be dealt with in a subtle way were missed through the fog of Russiagate, stealing our elections, Trump is a Putin puppet, et cetera. And please, take that up, Matt.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've obviously been pretty outspoken about this. I looked at it mostly from the media angle. I think Russiagate was an embarrassing episode in the history of American media mainly because of our propensity for reporting unsourced or stories that were sourced to anonymous intelligence sources where we can't see the proof of things. So, for instance, somebody might be told, well, the intelligence agents think that Carter Page is an agent of a foreign power, or the FISA court is reporting that this Trump aide is has had secret meetings with Russian intelligence officials, but we can't tell you how we know that or why we know that. And as reporters, we're not supposed to just dump that out there on the front page. Like we're supposed to confirm that somehow. And there were years of stories where we didn't do that because I think there was a belief among some reporters that the story was true, and then there were other people who just were incautious, And yeah, I think you make a good observation that this cartoonized version of what Russia was and what they were capable of may have obscured our ability to analyze what was actually going on in the country. Certainly, in 2012, when Barack Obama was running against Mitt Romney, and I think the quote was he called Russia a gnat on the butt of an elephant. That was. I think that was probably closer to the reality of what Russia was, where we depicted them as this all-powerful, sort of Iago-esque international figure that could reach into the American electoral system and change results. I don't think that was true at all. I think it's a nation that's got a lot of economic troubles, and the one thing that it has is a strong military, and it's deeply paranoid about the West, and it doesn't have a grand plan for conquering us. I think its plans are much more defensive. So on that front, like they're deeply afraid of the West, which might have I think stimulated this invasion of Ukraine, if that makes sense. But I'm with you on Russiagate. Obviously I've got tens of thousands of words written about this, that episode.
Matt, did you use the word Iago-esque?
Yeah,
you did.
I'm going to keep that. I like that.
You got to know your Shakespeare, but we do. We know our Shakespeare.
Well, of course.
You apologized for getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the apology from the mainstream media, quote unquote, for all the shit that they've gotten wrong over the last decade?
Yeah, well, non-existent. And if you go back even further to the WMD episode, not only did nobody apologize for getting that wrong, everybody got promoted. All the people who were the most wrong in that episode, they're all the editors of magazines now, some pretty influential ones, if you know what I'm talking about. I don't think it's. I think the media, when they don't apologize for making mistakes, they just make a tactical error. Like audiences, trust is the most important thing in media. If you don't have it, you're dead. You will lose audience share if people don't believe that you're being straight with them. If they don't believe that you have self-awareness, they won't listen to you anymore. And we've seen the national news media in this country has had tremendous problems keeping its audience, particularly with Trump out of the picture. And I think when you get stuff wrong, you got to cop to it, or else the people will stop believing what you have to say is true. And we just don't do that. Worse than that, we have a new habit of making silent edits. Right. So if there's a mistake, rather than announcing it in a big correction, you might just change it in the next version of the online, article, take out certain parts, not put a notation at the bottom of the page. Like, that stuff's also kind of Orwellian when you think about it, making changes and not telling people that there used to be another news story here that said something different. That's pretty creepy. And we're starting to do that more and more often.
A tiny bit of pushback on that, though. If you're trying to,
says the New York Times columnist,
where people's heads and hearts are, is that I think we tend, especially people who, I don't want to necessarily say intellectual, but people who have a story to tell, who are looking at things with a kind of broad perspective. You see trends, you get the feeling that things are moving in a certain direction, and your sense has to be, if you're any kind of scientist, your sense has to be that there are going to be some hairs out of place. There's going to be an eyelash behind the contact lens. Things go like this. They don't go like this. That's just the nature of things. And so you see something that's an exception. You see something that's wrong. And in your mind, you figure, okay, not perfect, but still the general story is this. I think you can therefore justify quite a bit. It can even go over 50%, quite a bit that doesn't fit your narrative. And I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to think in terms of narratives in itself. I think, frankly, to an extent, it's a kind of intelligence. If all you're going to do is collect butterflies, and Matt, I'm not accusing you of this at all, but if all you're going to do is collect butterflies, you're not an entomologist. And so, for example, we are talking around a few people in terms of these people who get promoted, et cetera, despite being wrong. I happened to have a conversation with one of those people not long ago for reasons that need not detain us. And that person was talking about, what's going on in Ukraine, et cetera. And I can say that that person has a story. That person is perfectly aware of what has gone wrong, where things have not followed the narrative of people like him. But I can't say that I found myself listening to a self-inflated blowhard who doesn't understand how the world works. It's that he sees a trend. And I'm just going to leave it there. And Matt, I completely take your point.
John, excuse me for interrupting. You're being too subtle for me. Maybe you and Matt are following. And I'm not asking you to name a name. I'm just asking you to add a little bit more detail to what it is that you're trying to get across.
Well, these neocons, right, Matt? I mean, the people who 20 years ago had a certain story they were promoting about why Iraq made sense and America's place in the world. I know a lot of those people, and I continue to know a lot of those people in various ways. And I can say that I completely understand Matt's critique. I don't agree with those people anymore on these, world issues, but I can always see how they can sleep at night. And it's because a person has a narrative, and one has to have a narrative to engage the world intelligently to an extent, I think. Is that
okay? I'm with you now, David Fromm. I'm with you now, Bill Crystal. I'm with you now, John Podhoretz. John Podhoretz Sucks is the title of one of Matt's recent columns. I'm with you now, Max Boot, Gelatinous Mediocrity, and so forth and so on. You say they've got a story.
They do.
What do you say, Matt? What do you say?
Well, okay. No, I understand what John's saying, and I think there's even some validity to that, but no, I'm the son of a news reporter. I grew up in newsrooms around reporters, like not around politicians, not around people, ideologues, right? Like my father was not in the narrative business. The people that I grew up around, reporters as a group were people who, when they did a story on the night that the story was about to be published, they could not sleep because they were afraid they got some little fact in there wrong that was going to ruin their reputations. That was like a commonality for every person in the journalism business. So getting something huge wrong, like this idea that Saddam Hussein has, weapons of mass destruction just around the corner. You trust us; it's right over that hill, and you do trust them, and you put it in the news, and it turns out not to be right. Like that's the kind of thing that you would not be able to live down if you were just purely a reporter, right? And I think I understand what you're saying, but there's a distinction, and this is what I was talking about, how there's been a drastic change in the way we do business. We are in the narrative business now. We didn't used to be. We were really much more in the business of saying, here's what we know, like we called all around, and this is what this person says, and this is what this person says, and this is what the official statements are. Here's the information. We checked it. You do what you want with it. You make your own decisions, and then we'll come back tomorrow and give you what we got since then. Now it's not really like that. Now we're in, what Wesley Loury calls the moral clarity business, which is we're trying to drive audiences in a direction. And I think we do that more than we used to, much more.
Wesley Gang?
No, Wesley Loury. He wrote an article about this whole phenomenon of what we call moral clarity in the journalism business, which is ditching the old objectivity model of journalism. What do you call the view from nowhere objectivity, which is just, the Republican says this, the Democrat says this, and here's the news, and do what you want with it.